It's an interesting time to be a sports fan. The Warriors on the brink of clinching the NBA Finals, the Capitals on the brink of their Stanley Cup title. We're trying to bring you a little bit of college basketball as World Cup season gets underway in soccer. But we'll keep bringing you college basketball throughout the off season. We're doing that just right now on the CBB Central podcast. And Brad, how have you been kind of dealing with all the sports but college basketball going on right now, as we kind of hit this end point where it's going to be just baseball? And I'm a big baseball guy, but that's a tough time in the sports year. I can't say I enjoy it.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I made the decision where I'm not going to watch any more baseball or football. It's going to be all basketball all the time, and you can pretty much do it. September's a little slow, and then August a little bit too. But besides that, there's usually basketball year round. I mean, I think in 3 or 4 days we get the under 18 team, which a lot of those games aren't very competitive, but that's at least something. And then you got NBA draft, you got summer league, and then you got some college foreign tours you got to watch on like buffering Facebook live feeds. So, I mean, there's something basketball related to watch for the next few months.
I'm all in on TBT. I was a first year TBT watcher when it was playing for $250,000. I believe the Notre Dame alumni team won that year. Since it's been all overseas elite, but that's a really fun event that I'm looking forward to this summer. I got one horse in the race. My hometown Saints Alive team from Siena, their alumni team, is a 9 seed. Last time they were a 9 seed, Ronald Moore hit that incredible shot in the NCAA tournament to beat Ohio State. They nearly beat Louisville that year. They're a 9 seed in TBT. So I'm looking forward to that. That's some summer basketball to look forward to. But let's look a little bit ahead towards next fall and kind of what we are looking at for the 2018-19 college basketball season. This episode, we're going to focus on our top 10 transfers, both grad transfers this year and guys who sat out last year. So to kind of give you guys a look at some of the guys we think will make the biggest impacts on their teams next season. But first, we have a couple of quick news and notes just to touch on. The first one was the John Beilein situation at Michigan. Reports of him interviewing with the Pistons, reports of there being serious interest mutually, but he has tweeted that he will be returning to Michigan. It appears that Pistons job will go to Dwayne Casey or a Spurs assistant. So John Beilein is back at Michigan. Will get an increased pay, increased salary for his assistants. I never really thought too much of this rumor just because I thought, John Beilein at 65 years old has never really had the recruiting cachet. That's been the one area where he struggles. Has been unable to get those top recruits. He showed with 2019 kid Jalen Wilson, who just committed to Michigan, that he can get those guys now after the national title run this year, the recent success that this Michigan program had. To me, this was not the right time to move up, but I guess it was the only time to move up for an NBA spot if he was ever going to make the move at 65 years of age. Brad, what did you kind of make of these rumors, and how big is it, obviously, that Michigan keeps their man in charge long term?
So I was rooting for him to take the Pistons job if it was offered, just because kind of like the whole Chris Holtmann saga last summer. We get some late coaching carousel news. It's always very interesting. And ironically, I think Butler might have been the loser again if Beilein would have left. I think, LaVall Jordan is a former John Beilein assistant, so it would be crazy if they lost their coach again in back-to-back off seasons. And then where does Butler go from there? Maybe Micah Shrewsbury on the Celtics. Maybe Ronald Norred, who's like I think a G League coach, a former Butler player. But that's all a moot point now. And Michigan should have a top 25 team. They have a couple recruits who I think will make a pretty big impact. Ignas Brazdeikis and Brandon Johns. I think that, even though that they're listed as a 3 and a 4 respectively, I think that Brazdeikis could play a lot of 4 and Johns could play a lot of 5. I know that it kind of looks like John Teskey could be the starting 5-man now, but I think Johns is more in that Michigan mold of kind of like a more mobile, more skilled big man. As we saw, guys like Wagner is very skilled, and then even dating back to like a Mitch McGary, someone who is very athletic and could could really make an impact uh, on the backboards.
Yeah, it's a really interesting incoming group, and I think we'll definitely do a deep dive on this Michigan team for next season at some point. Brad Zekis is the headliner. He's a 4-star recruit. I've seen him actually in some rankings as a 5-star, but he's an outstanding recruit. Picked him up over pretty much every high major program was interested in Ignis Brazdeikis, the Canadian product. They also have a four-star point guard, David Jahulius. Brandon Johns, the 4-star big man, as well as a couple of 3-star recruits as well. Combine that with Jordan Poole, Isaiah Livers, John Teskey, as you mentioned, and then Simpson and Matthews. And I think Michigan will be right back in the top 25, possibly even in the top 15. I trust John Beilein. I agree that Laval Jordan might have been the pick, but fortunately for Butler, fortunately for Michigan, that doesn't go anywhere as John Beilein will return. Another guy returning to college basketball, Phil Kofer from Florida State. He gets a waiver for his 5th year of eligibility. That's huge news for Florida State, just that versatile combo forward who can kind of do it all. I'm not as high on Florida State quite as you are, Brad, but I think this is definitely a top 15 to 20 team in college basketball.
Yeah, I currently have them, I think, at like 10 or 11. I'm starting to kind of walk that back a little bit. I think my initial reaction was, I think a guy like Trent Forrest and a guy like MJ Walker, they're both very, very talented, and they'll be stepping into bigger roles. I know Walker didn't really show as much as people thought during his freshman year, but Forrest was really good, especially in the NCAA tournament. And then a guy like Kevin Gelly, who I think could earn 25 to 28 minutes a game at center. I think all those guys, stepping into bigger roles, I thought that there was a lot of value added for Florida State. My reasoning wasn't so much they made the Sweet 16 or however far they advanced in the NCAA tournament. It was more of these former role players now stepping into starting roles, and then you bring back these 2 proven guys in Terrence Mann and Phil Kofer, and they're extremely deep. They're like 8 or 9 deep, and they have a bunch of guys who were redshirted last year who could perhaps make an impact. I thought this was just a deep and experienced team, but the more I look at this team, I think they're a consensus rank or they're a composite rank rather of like 14 is a little more accurate at this point.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is like how much do you trust their point guard situation? Because I think they're super athletic, they're super deep, as you've said, but they do lose CJ Walker, who ran the show for them to a certain degree. They also had Trent Forrest, who was in the backcourt. He was kind of they kind of split ball handling where Forrest was a better distributor, Walker a bit more of a scorer, but Walker brought the ball up the floor and guarded the point guard defensively. So Forrest is going to have to continue that role. And then they bring in David Nichols, who I think is a pretty good comparison actually to CJ Walker. He's more of an ISO pick and roll point guard who's not necessarily the best passer, but does a really good job scoring the basketball. Averaged 18 points a game as a sophomore at Albany. Before that, dipping a little bit to 14 this year for the Great Danes. But I think it's a lot is what do you believe in at the point guard spot, and what do you believe in from this Florida State team that was kind of near the bubble for most of the season, kind of sat in that 9 seed range where they were safe, but they weren't so safe that you felt all that comfortable. How much of a jump do we expect bringing back just mostly the same dudes, especially, losing a guy in Brian Angola, who I think was a lot more valuable than people really thought, which is why I'm kind of sitting more in the 15 to 20 range. But I certainly think this is a NCAA tournament team, a top half team in the ACC.
I think, though, in terms of them like bringing a large portion of their team back, I mean, Leonard Hamilton's a guy who I think two seasons ago used in an 11-man rotation, and hopefully with they have like a clear top 8-ish on this roster. So I think that the guys who were reserves last year, Forrest played great down the stretch, and Walker has so much upside. Same with Kevin Gelly. I think that they could really make a jump. I think the trap that many people, myself definitely included, absolutely included last year with Seton Hall and Northwestern, is that they were very talented and very experienced, but for the most part, they were literally bringing everyone back and in the same roles. I kind of convinced myself that Aaron Falzone was going to be this impact power forward because he was a starter the year prior before missing that year due to injury, and I was convinced for Seton Hall that Sonogo was a little better than he was, and I thought that Sandro Mamashkavili and Jordan Walker were going to be a little bit better than they were, but even that, those guys were going to be, sixth men, seventh men at the very best. This Florida State team has these guys who I think could really break out and could really make pretty significant jumps to the point where they're an upgrade over the players that they are replacing. Like I think that Trent Forrest is definitely going to be an upgrade over CJ Walker, and I think that MJ Walker less confidently. I think that MJ Walker could be an upgrade over Brian Angola Reyes.
Yeah, I think you make some fair points, and they're gonna be a team that I'm gonna watch a lot early in the season and make my judgment on. I think that's one of the biggest things in college basketball that I think guys in the media are afraid to say at times, is that sometimes you just have to watch a team and see how it all comes together. I learned so much in the first month, and obviously teams develop quite a bit, but over the season. But I think you learn a lot watching a team in the first month. Not necessarily, do they have it or not, but like what certain players have improved to the point where this team can make that jump that you were thinking they might be able to. That's kind of where I am with Florida State. One more quick one before we head into our top 10 transfer, is this kind of confusing LeGerald Vick situation. LeGerald Vick entered the draft seemingly with an agent. He made it clear he was not going to return to Kansas back in April. But he removed his name from the draft deadline on May 31st. He is not really clear what his next step will be. He's looking into the G League where he could play a year, but that doesn't really make. I don't really understand why you would leave the draft to go to the D League, the G League, excuse me. He could just get signed by a D League team after the season ends. After he goes undrafted. There's also the possibility he returned to school. His mom said that he would at some point speak to Bill Self. There was rumors flying on Twitter that LeGerald Vick was in the city of Louisville. We do not know if he was on campus at Louisville. We don't know what the reasoning was, why he was in Louisville, but that did cause some rumors as well that he might be headed to the Cardinal. What are your thoughts here, Brad, with this LeGerald Vick situation, which to me feels like he's headed back to college, but at the same time feels like he isn't going back to Kansas?
Yeah, so I actually saw that same tweet about Vick being in Louisville, and I mean it does make sense because Louisville does have a few scholarships, and he'll be a sit one play one, so he could step in and replace some of the production that's going to be lost by these grad transfers that they have coming in, but. I have no pulse on like where he could go. I think going to the G League would be an interesting option because he could kind of reset his draft stock in a sense where if he plays well in the G League, and I think he's better set up to play well than a guy like Darius Baisley who's more raw. Vic kind of fits that 3-and-D mold, which is all the rage in the NBA. If he has a strong G League, he could go into next draft and essentially been showing a resume at AAA where all these college players were playing at AA. It could definitely give him a leg up. I would bet against that. I don't think he's ever going to be a first round player. So maybe playing in a summer league or trying to get a two-way contract would have been better. But going back to Kansas will be in the mix for the number one team in the country, and he'll be one of their top scorers.
Yeah, Vic's going to be a really interesting kind of piece to monitor here. If I'm Chris Mack at Louisville, obviously the talent's there, but at the same time, LeGerald Vick has been a problem at Kansas for the last 3 years. There's been some stuff both in the news and behind the scenes about LeGerald Vick that I don't necessarily think it makes a ton of sense if I'm Chris Mack building a culture and a culture similar to that of what Xavier built under Chris Mack to bring in LeGerald Vick and have him sit one to play one. To me, I'm not quite as sold. Now, obviously, Vic is an outstanding player. He's better in 1 year than I think 80 to 95% of recruits would be. But at the same time, I think it might just be best if he goes pro. The G League draft is a good point, Brad, that he would be able to get drafted and potentially boost his draft stock that way. But to me, it's time for him to move on from college basketball. I don't think sitting one and will be any good for him. Although in the right system and in the right development, I think it could pay some dividends.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to sit a year if I'm him. Being so close to an NBA prospect, kind of similar to Dedrick Lawson, who I'm sure that we'll talk on a little bit later. But I thought he was a guy who, he transfers to Kansas. I thought, like dating back to like during the season, I thought he was gonna declare for the draft and never play at Kansas and just sit out that year. And he just did to get his brother onto that Kansas roster. But in terms of why Louisville potentially shouldn't add a talented sit one play one like Vic is that they have a really strong 2019 potential class. They already got Josh Nickelberry, who's a top 60 recruit as like a 6'4" 2 guard, and they're in the mix for some of the best players at each position. That Jarius Ramsey, I think is his name. I think that there's a lot of crystal ball activity between him and Louisville. Jalen Withers on the wing, and then there were a few other big men too that they were mentioned with. Aiden Eichhorn, I think his name is like a high rising big man from Ireland, I believe. So they have enough quality recruits that they could conceivably get that you kind of want to be looking more toward the future than kind of a plug and play type of guy like Vic.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, and especially given the chemistry potential concerns there, certainly something that Chris Mack has to weigh. But you mentioned Dedrick Lawson. Let's just get right into his top 10 transfer list. This is an idea Brad had. He sent it over my way. Made a lot more sense once I read his top 30 grad transfer list. So we decided we'd kind of do a full podcast on this, look at the top 10 sit-out guys now available. So they sat out last season and going to play this year. And then the top 10 grad transfers who will be immediately eligible for this season. Let's start with the sit-out guys who are now eligible, Brad. I went number one with Dedrick Lawson, just because to me he is perhaps the best player in the Big 12 and the top 10 player in college basketball this year. I mean, he was absurd at Memphis. He averaged 19 points, 10 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 46% from the field, only shot 27% from three. That was about his only weakness. He also blocked a good amount of shots at Memphis as well. Blocked 2.1 shots per game, also 1.3 steals. So he's an impact player on both ends of the floor. He can switch basically 1 to 5 on defense. And that's one of the things that I really like about this Kansas roster. I threw him at number one. I also threw in with him KJ Lawson and Charlie Moore. I just grouped them all together as one entity of the Kansas transfers. But has there ever been a transfer haul that's more talented than this one, Brad?
I don't think so. And I think that Lawson is clearly the top transfer. I mean, dating back to his sophomore year at Memphis, he was invited to the combine, and most people thought he was going to stay in and actually get selected in the mid to early second round. He makes this surprising decision to transfer. And I mean, I don't know if he can play his way into the first round with the strong performance, but I think you really hit the nail on the head with, he's clearly the preseason Big 12 player of the year. I mean, you could maybe make an argument for his teammate, Udoka Azubuike, maybe Sagaba Kanate, maybe Barry Brown, outside chance at Lindell Wigington if you're an Iowa State fan. But I mean, if that's his competition for the Big 12 player of the year, I think it clearly shows that he's head and shoulders above his competition.
Yeah, they're just loaded with these transfers. Did you have Dietrich Lawson #1 on your transfer list? I assume you did.
Yes, I didn't group all the Kansas guys together. I had Charlie Moore just missing the top 10. Spoiler alert. And I didn't rank KJ, but in terms of an overall transfer haul, yeah, I mean that's an unbelievable one, especially for a school that doesn't even need to do that, where they can just pull top recruits like Quentin Grimes and Devin Dotson almost at a snap of the fingers.
Yeah, I will say I'm generally not as high on KJ Lawson or Charlie Moore as I think consensus is. I think KJ's numbers look a lot better when you don't look at how inefficient he was for a big guy. He shot 40% from the field, 33% from three. When you're a guy who plays the 3 and the 4, even played a little bit of 5 for Memphis that sophomore season. That's a little concerning for me. And then Charlie Moore was also fairly inefficient, not a huge assist guy. I like Devin Dotson more than Charlie Moore, but I think it allows Charlie Moore to kind of settle into that role of a 6-man scorer. He'll play a lot next to Grimes. He'll play a lot next to Dotson. He's going to be a really nice piece. I just don't think I'm quite as high as consensus is on Charlie Moore for what it's worth.
No, I'm not either. I mean, I think a lot of people. I remember, looking back to when he chose Kansas, I was very surprised because he could easily get recruited over, and probably by about January or February, I would guess that Dotson is earning more playing time than he is. I mean, but could also work in the same way where you have guys like Grimes who could be a one and done. Dotson maybe is a 2 or 3 and done, and then Moore has some minutes available. We know that Bill Self is not averse to playing multiple point guards at once, and looking at a projected lineup for Kansas, it's probably either Moore or Dodson with Grimes and Marcus Garrett as their perimeters. That's 3 guards right there that can all create, and it is a really, really promising roster here for Kansas, even if they don't end up getting a guy like Silvio De Souza eligible. I know that's a major question mark for this offseason.
I will say Charlie Moore was transferring from Cal to get closer to home. There was a school about 12 miles north of his home in Chicago that could have used a point guard for 2018-19. Could have sat one year, came to a prestigious institution, sat behind a Northwestern legend in Bryant McIntosh, and then learned the craft. Not going to say you should have went to Northwestern, but you should have went to Northwestern. Sorry about that, Charlie Moore. Little fan in me coming out here. But Moore will be a really nice piece of Kansas. I can't certainly blame him for headed to a place like the Jayhawks. Brad, who do you have #2 in your transfer list? Top sit out guys.
Number 2, I have Tevin Mack from Texas going to Alabama. I think he should step right in to that void that was left when Braxton Key transferred. I think he'll start. He averaged, I think, like 14 points a game. He at Texas before getting, I think, suspended and ultimately kicked off the team. But he can shoot it. He has great size. He's that prototypical like college combo forward who should thrive at the power forward. He'll be playing in this long athletic group with all these future pros like Herb Jones and Dante Hall and John Petty and Dazon Ingram. Could be the most switchable team in the country. So I think Alabama is definitely a team to watch, and Mack could easily lead them in scoring.
Yeah, I think Tevin Mack's going to be another 15 a game type guy. I think he'll lead Alabama in scoring. I had him in just below you. I had him at #3 on my list. I'll touch on who I had over him in just a sec. But Mack is, he's efficient. He shoots the ball extremely well, as you said. The trouble off the court is where you kind of worry, as well as his free throw shooting, which is really strangely low for a guy who shoots 39% from 3 on 6 attempts a game. He only shot 59% from the free throw line as a sophomore at Texas, and I think that's something he could work on. Is getting to the line a little bit more. He only got to the line 3.5 times a game. For a guy who's as versatile as a playmaker, I think he settled for 3s at times last year when he didn't need to, or 2 years ago, excuse me. But I'm super excited about Tevin Mack. Only guy I had above Tevin Mack, other than that Kansas trio, was my '2, Brandon Clark, the San Jose State transfer. I just love how he fits at Gonzaga. Averaged 17 points, 8.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists, 2.6 blocks. He really does have some equity as a weak side rim protector, which I really like in this Gonzaga system. He's super efficient. He's developed as a shooter, I think, during his redshirt season. That was kind of the one hole in his game as a 6'7" guy who's going to need to shoot it to stick in the NBA. But I'm really excited about Brandon Clark. I'm really excited about this Gonzaga roster as a whole. I think the only reason why I could have moved him down was simply I don't think he makes quite as big an impact as, say, a Tevin Mack, because Gonzaga is so deep and so talented 1 through 5. They can afford to not have a Brandon Clark. They have a lot of size up front, whereas I think Alabama desperately needed that combo forward type that Tevin Mack provides.
Yeah, that's something that I try to factor into my rankings. I kind of approach the rankings. I talked about this in depth in that grad transfer article, but I try to approach it as how much value is this player adding to college basketball from like a national perspective. And so Clark got bumped on my list because I think he's probably going to come off the bench for Gonzaga. You would think Rui Hachimura and Tilly would be the 4 and the 5, and then Norvell and Kisper on the wing and Perkins at the 1. But I mean, Clark's going to play 25 minutes per game at the very least. He's going to make an impact, but just the fact that the guys in front of him are going to be more star standout type of guys who are going to get more offensive responsibility. Push Clark down in my list, but he's definitely worthy of a spot on the list, and maybe even higher than I have him at number 7.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, and I think they might bring Hachimura off the bench again. Like, he was so awesome in that role last year, where I think it's pretty clear that Clark or Hachimura comes off the bench as just like a super athletic energy forward who can do it all. I think it's probably Clark, but I think there's like a small chance you could bring Hachimura off the bench again. Although even though he might be the best player in the conference, which is kind of absurd.
Agreed. So who do you have at number 4?
I grouped CJ Bryce and Devon Daniels together. Daniels is a guy who I kept hearing about. And then I really did like a dive on him today when I was making my list. And I was like, he was absurdly efficient. Like, he shot 57% from the field on 10 points a game. Like, that's absurd for a guard. He shot the ball well from 3, although he didn't take as many attempts. He didn't have too many attempts. He was shooting only 1.2 attempts per game. But this is a guy I really like. This both Bryce and Devon Daniels and Eric Lockett from NC State, who's a grad transfer from FIU, who's coming in this year, also contributes to this, where they have such good rebounding guards where Daniels can rebound the ball, Bryce can rebound the ball, Lockett averaged 6.5 boards at FIU, where they can play some real 4-guard lineups with 4 dudes who can just absolutely break you off the bounce, and then 1 big, and that's going to be scary.
Yeah, that's the old Kevin Keatts style from his time at UNC Wilmington, where he used CJ Bryce at the 4, and he'll have Bryce at his disposal at NC State this season. I had separated Daniels and Bryce in my rankings. I had Daniels at 4 and Bryce at 8. I kind of have a hard time kind of reconciling how good Bryce is going to be. Daniels, I mean, he averaged 10 points per game at Utah, in a Power 5 league on a pretty good team as a freshman. So if he had stayed and played this year, maybe Utah is an NCAA tournament team, and maybe he's averaging 14, 15 points a game and is looked at totally differently. I think one of the reasons why I'm so high on NC State for this season, I have them higher than literally everyone right now. I have them at 15 in my early top 25. But it's they have all these great wings and guys like Daniels and Bryce and Lockett, as you mentioned, and Torin Dorn too. Just add so much value. They're so versatile, and they can shoot, they can create. It really gives NC State a really good competitive advantage. In terms of Bryce, I don't know if he can handle playing power forward full time at the ACC level. I mean, with the way that basketball is kind of moving. I think it's more realistic, but he could definitely manage it more than capably at the uh, CAA level.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, Bryce, I'm not concerned about Bryce at all in terms of being a 2 or a 3, though. I mean, the guy can shoot the ball. He shot 33% from three as a sophomore, but he's a capable 3-point shooter. They do trust him out there. He had 3 assists a game. So he can certainly create his own shot and create for others as well. So he's a guy I think you can play him from 2 through 4. Even you're not going to play him at the 1 when you have Markel Johnson, but he's a guy who is so dangerous because he can lead the break when he gets a rebound. Average about 5 rebounds a night for UNC Wilmington on that really good Kevin Keats team. So he's going to be exciting to watch. I think he's kind of an 8 to 12 point a game guy at the next level. I don't know where he plays between the 2, 3, and the 4, but he's just a darn good basketball player.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's all semantics, but I would think Daniels 2, Dorn 3, Bryce 4, or maybe Dorn 2, Daniels 3, Bryce 4, and then Lockett probably is the 4 when he comes in and would shift whoever else up. But that's a great problem to have, having all those super talented wing players. I accidentally skipped over number 3 on my list, and that was Mario Kegler from Mississippi State going to Baylor, combo forward. Where did you have Kegler on your list, Kevin?
I have Kegler way down at 9, which is like a little low looking back on it. I was never like the hugest Mario Kegler fan when I watched him at Mississippi State. The numbers were very solid for a freshman. 10 points, 5 rebounds, an assist, shot 42%, 35% from 3. He's going to be a very nice player in the Big 12. I think he's going to be a starter, probably play that combo forward spot, and a really nice piece for Bryce Drew. They've had guys like him in the past, that kind of bruiser 4-man to go with they always have good 5s. So I think Kegler's really solid. I'm just not quite as high on him as some other guys. Just from what I watched of him, he kind of phased in and out, especially down the stretch. The final 5 games of his career at Mississippi State, he scored just 6 points a game and had 4.5 rebounds. So he was in and out with that team. He certainly had some bright moments. Had that game against South Carolina that was pretty big. He had 16 in that one. So he had some really nice games down the stretch, but the final few games of the year, he scared me off a little bit, I guess, which is when I was watching Mississippi State come conference tournament time.
Yeah, I've always liked Kegler. I was very disappointed when he left Mississippi State, because I thought that this season Mississippi State could have been really good with him manning that power forward spot. He has the capable size of playing a power forward, but he has kind of the skill set of a wing, which I think makes him really appealing, especially in a Scott Drew's system. They play a zone, a 1-3-1 kind of variation. It's kind of like a 1-1-3 almost. But having these long versatile wings like that is a very useful. And he's got he averaged almost 10 points a game as a freshman, so he could probably even get up to that 14, 15 point per game range, like we were mentioning with Devin Daniels. So I think he could actually end up being one of the better players in the conference coming off of this redshirt year. I'm not super high on Baylor. I know one of my friends, my friend Patrick Wong, he had texted me because I didn't put Makai Mason on the list, but I just don't know if Mason is going to be healthy. He missed the past 2 seasons with injuries, and then if Mason's not healthy, Baylor has this real kind of hole in terms of a playmaking guard next to King McClure. So I mean, if a Baylor is an NIT team, how much value does a Kegler actually have? So maybe in hindsight, I do have him a little too high. Maybe if we split the difference between 3 and 9, maybe like 6 is a more appropriate spot for him.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Mason's going to be interesting to watch. That's a good one you mentioned. I was looking at him today. I just don't trust his health, but if he's healthy, he was so fun in that EL team as a sophomore. At number 5, I had the New Mexico duo, Jaquan Lyle and Vance Jackson. Jaquan Lyle was really good at Ohio State, 11.5 points, 4.5 assists, shot the ball well. He was a guy who, to me, obviously it provided a lot of trouble off the court, but on the court, he was, terrific. Um, I'm not as high as consensus is on Vance Jackson, just because to me, he's a stretch four who just wants to shoot. He shot for he was like, I'm going to New Mexico because they're gonna play me as a guard, and I was like, if you're gonna be really good, you're gonna be a stretch four and like attack, and to me, that's where he needs to be. That's not where I think he sees himself needing to be. He's not all that efficient. He's basically to me, he's a bit of a chucker. But overall, it's still a really talented group that brings a lot to this table for this New Mexico team.
Yeah, I separated Lyle and Jackson on my list, but I had Jaquan Lyle at number 5 as well. You mentioned he's this big physical guard who I think could definitely overpower smaller guards who typically play in the Mountain West. He's a former top 30 recruit, and he was very productive at Ohio State. He was someone who was thrown right into the fire, and I know that he drew a lot of criticism because of his not being a traditional pure point guard in some of his decision making. But I think after the sit out year and kind of going down a step in a competition, I think Lyle could definitely make a huge impact and maybe even exceed like 20 points per game and kind of be one of the faces of mid-major basketball.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how Paul Weir plays. He likes to have lots of guards who can distribute, shoot the ball. So it's pretty. It'll be really fun to watch how he uses Lyle. I don't think he's necessarily a guy you want to play next to like a pure shooter like Anthony Mathis, who is only going to shoot the ball, or like Vance Jackson as well. If you play like Lyle, Jackson, and Mathis, you leave Lyle without some ball handling that I think he needs. But they do bring in Drew Drennan, and they do bring back some ball handling as well. So should be interesting to see how Paul Weir goes about things. Who did you have? You had Lyle at number 5. Who was your number 6?
Number 6, I had Mariel Shayok, a good example of a sit one, play one, who I think works really well on this Iowa State roster. I think he could step right in and provide a lot of scoring and some 3-and-D on the wing. So where did you have Shayok, if at all, on your transfer list?
I actually did not have Shayok on there. I'm kind of low on him compared to consensus. I mean, he shoots the ball okay. Like, he shot the ball 33% on 1.5 attempts as a junior. He does create. He's very strong. He defends well. I think he comes off the bench for this Iowa State team. I think they'll go with Wigington, Weiler Babb, Talon Horton Tucker. And they might go with Shayok and go 4 guards and then go with Lard at the 5. That'll be interesting to watch, but he's certainly I think he's a good rotation player, but I don't think he's gonna, provide the same impact to some of the other guys I had later on my list.
Yeah, I think in terms of he can play 2 through 4. I know at Virginia he wasn't really able to showcase like his full offensive package, for better or for worse. I mean, he could really be exposed as being like an inefficient gunner now that he's out of Tony Bennett's system. But I think he will show positive, and I think he will show an ability to create his own shot and to hit open 3-pointers and to kind of fill this kind of role that Iowa State players have had over the year, kind of similar to like an Abdel Nader. I know that Nader was kind of more of a combo forward, lean toward power forward in terms of his time at Iowa State, and then now in the NBA, he's like a true like 2 guard. So I think that Shayok could potentially have that same career path.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So you had Shayok at 6. You had already mentioned Brandon Clark at 7. I'll give you my number 7. Marcus Evans from VCU. That's dependent on his health. He's dealing with another Achilles injury after missing this season during his transfer redshirt year as with an Achilles injury. That's certainly a scary thing to be dealing with. But Evans, if he's healthy, I think he's a top 5 transfer because he was elite at Rice and could have went anywhere in the country. Chose to follow Mike Rhodes to VCU, but his health is absolutely critical to VCU's success.
Yeah, I threw Evans at number 10 because of the health. It seems like he might be done. It said like another Achilles injury for him. But if he's out for the season, I mean that's so crushing for VCU, who I think would be a top 2 team in the Atlantic 10 clearly, along with St. Louis if he's healthy. I mean he was kind of inefficient at Rice, but Rice wasn't a great team, so he had to shoulder a lot of the load. I mean, Rice got hit again today, losing a grad transfer to Creighton, who will join Creighton's starting lineup. That we'll touch on a little bit later. But Evans is clearly an impact player and would have been or will be one of the best players in the Atlantic 10.
Yeah, I missed over my number 6 somehow. Chase Jeter at Arizona. I wasn't huge on him at Duke, but Duke transfers had a lot of success once they leave. Jeter's a guy, if nothing else, is a very good rotation big guy for the Wildcats.
Yeah, I had Jeter at number 9. Same thing. I mean, he was such a highly rated recruit. He's very athletic with that sit-out year, and he has a ton of minutes available at Arizona. Let's roll the dice and see if he can perform.
So is that all your guys? Have you touched on all 10?
Yes.
Okay, let me touch on my 2 that I haven't gotten to just yet. Real quick, Dietrich Mastella at Jacksonville State. I pulled this one out. I don't think anyone's going to be mentioning him, but I saw this one originally last year in preseason prep. Dietrich Mastella was like really good at Tennessee. He averaged 10 points in 21 minutes a game as a 6'3" guard who can shoot the ball well. He shot 37% from 3. He averaged 10.5 points a game, was an SEC player of the week at one point. He was in some trouble, sat out last season as a transfer to Jacksonville State. He's going to average like 20 a night there. And he's going to be awesome. And Ray Harper's going to win 20 games at Jacksonville State. So I just threw him on as like a courtesy nod at number 8, just because I want to be on the Dietrich Mastella bandwagon early. And then number 10, Peter Kiss at Rutgers. I fell in love with this kid at Quinnipiac. He's just a competitor, shoots the ball well. His numbers as a 3-point shooter at Quinnipiac of 28% does not tell the story at all. He is a sharpshooter. He just kind of was stuck on a team that had no floor spacing, and so he had to create a lot and just chucked at times. But he's really good, and he's going to help Rutgers because he's going to compete on both ends. He's actually sneaky athletic, won a dunk contest at Rutgers. So to me, he's a guy who's kind of being slept on nationally, who's going to be really nice piece for the Scarlet Knights.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you brought up Dietrich Mastella. He's someone who I definitely he definitely caught my eye when he was at Tennessee, and the Jacksonville State also has the transfer from Oregon State, right? Derek Bruce, or did he end up at Texas Southern? I don't remember if he started at Texas Southern and then went to Jacksonville State, or vice versa.
Let me dig into that real quick. I think he's at Texas Southern now. That's what I've got. He was at Texas Southern last year. Yeah, he's at Texas Southern. I believe he sat last year at Texas Southern.
Well, that's more shots for Dietrich Mastella. But in the same vein of like a sleeper transfer to keep an eye on, I would definitely keep an eye on Seti Kita from South Carolina to St. John's. I mean, right now he has the whole center position to himself. He was not very productive at all, but he was in South Carolina's rotation when they went to the Final Four. He got hurt in the preseason and was kind of beat out by Mike Kotsar and Chris Silva, obviously, in the front court. So there were very limited minutes, but he's someone who was not able to really showcase his full ability. And now he'll have, at the very least 25 minutes a game to work with. He can shoot the ball better than people realize, and he's a good face-up post player.
Yeah, that's a good call. He might be the most important transfer in college basketball just because he needs to play minutes at that 5 spot. Let's move on to grad transfers. We have 10 of those for you guys as well. We've kind of touched on all of these guys throughout the podcast, so we can be a little bit more brief with our analysis of each one. I had Reed Travis at number 1. I think it's pretty clear he's a superstar at Stanford. He'll be a superstar at either Villanova or at Kentucky. I'm picking Villanova. Do you pick Villanova for Reed Travis's landing spot at this point?
So I also have Travis number 1 in my rankings. I mean, he's going to start at center at both Villanova and Kentucky, and I think that you can make a case for both teams to be number 1 with him. I think Kentucky would definitely be number 1, and Villanova would probably be around top 5, top 3. I think I'm going to go Kentucky. The Kentucky guys, like I saw Kyle Tucker on Twitter, they're just so overly confident that, I mean, like they're more confident that Travis is coming to Kentucky than I was that the Martin twins were not going to be at Nevada. So that's really telling you something.
Yeah, that's when all the buzz is, but I think there's almost like a buzz that like Villanova will get a visit to me. Tells me that Villanova has a real chance, and almost like a better chance than the odds makers would predict, if you will. So I'll roll with Villanova. We'll have some fun there. I'd love to see him there. My number 2 grad transfer was Ryan Taylor at Northwestern. I have a bit of a story to tell here with Ryan Taylor. One of my good friends here at Northwestern walked into the gym the other day, just like the student gym, and Ryan Taylor is in the gym. And he's making every shot. And so my good friend, he starts counting the shots. Ryan Taylor made 84 consecutive shots. The guy is an absurd shooter. He shot 42% last season from 3 at Evansville on super high volume as the focal point of every scouting report. Averaged 21 points as the Missouri Valley scoring champion. He basically just replaces Scotty Lindsey, and to me that's super valuable, and is, as I think, to me more valuable than almost any grad transfer on the market, other than maybe a Reed Travis, who in terms of like the minutes they'll play and the importance of the minutes they'll play.
And so I actually had Taylor down at number 10. I think that might be too low for him. I mean, he's going to start. He's probably going to be Northwestern's leading scorer. Not sure if he's going to be their best player or not. I think you can make an argument for Vic Law, but I just don't know how good Northwestern's going to be. And all the other guys on my list, I have their teams in the NCAA tournament, and Taylor is the one outlier there. So the production will definitely be there. I think you mentioned he's an elite shooter, which could definitely get him some NBA looks. But I just don't know if I can rank him over guys who are going to make huge impacts that directly lead to their teams being more successful than I project Northwestern to be.
That's pretty fair. I think I'm a little higher on Northwestern than the consensus. That might be my fanhood speaking, but other than point guard, I think they have as good a roster as most Power 5 teams. In terms of like in the Big Ten, there's only like 3 rosters I'd take over Northwestern. In terms of like 2 through 5, it's just point guard, who's going to play point guard, and we'll touch on that a little later in the show. But Ryan Taylor is going to be a really nice piece for them, which is why I think Northwestern's a fringe tournament team. But we'll get to that, of course, this offseason. Who did you have at number 2 then, Brad?
Number 2, I had Joe Cremo, who is definitely going to Villanova from Albany. He will step right in for Dante DiVincenzo. He'll average double figures. He's going to shoot the ball. He's a great secondary creator. He averaged, I think, close to 4 assists a game, if not over 4 assists per game as a junior at Albany. I just love his fit so much, and having him in there instead of a guy like Colin Gillespie, who can now play a 6-man role, I think just adds so much value for the defending champions.
Yeah, I had Cremo at 3, elite shooter. I've been watching him since high school. He played high school basketball about 15 minutes from where I grew up. So he's a really good kid and a really talented player. He doesn't create offense the same way that a Dante DiVincenzo does, but he's such a good shooter. He fits so seamlessly into the Villanova system. I think him and Gillespie are actually a fair bit similar in terms of their like ability to create a little bit, shoot the ball extremely well, attack a little bit, but not necessarily have that killer instinct. Joe Cremo wasn't really the first option offensively at all times for Albany. They also had Travis Charles and David Nichols. Nichols had the ball in his hands a lot. So I think some of the Joe Cremo is an elite scorer. Stuff is been a little bit misguided by some like blue check mark college basketball media, but overall still a huge pickup.
Yeah, he's definitely not an elite scorer. I think he'll average double figures. Mostly, I would guess off jump shots. But I would think that Eric Paschall definitely is better and would score more, as would Phil Booth. I think even maybe a Javon Quinterly could average more points per game than Cremo, but he's still going to be super valuable.
All right, who did you have at number 3 then? Since I had Cremo at 3.
3, I had Matt Mooney from South Dakota to Texas Tech. Even though he's not a true point guard, he's going to start at point guard, presumably for the Red Raiders. And I think without him, Texas Tech was an NIT team at best. Now that he's in the picture, I think they have a legitimate chance at making the NCAA tournament.
I had Mooney at 5. We pretty much know what he was at South Dakota. His numbers were identical year to year. Really good shooter, really good creator, does a lot of different things, is a really good leader. Just a really nice pickup for Tech.
So who else did you have in your top? You had Taylor at 2 and Cremo at 3. So who do you have at number 4?
I had Zach Johnson at 4, going to Miami. I fell in love with Zach Johnson in that conference tournament game against Lipscomb when they were down like 30 at halftime for Florida Gulf Coast. And the dude just competes on both ends. He's a shot maker. He's super athletic, but he really loves to dig on defense and get steals and get easy buckets at the other end. He's a guy I just love watching play. I think he really helps this Miami team, which is, I think, has a really nice backcourt between him and Miles Wilson, Chris Likes, Vasilovich as well. So I'm pretty excited about what they've got in the backcourt with Johnson. And it's just a matter of kind of the similar problem this year of all those guys and then DeJuan Hewell, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I had Johnson at 13, but I do regret that because every other guy in my top 10 was a big scorer on a team that at least has a chance to make the NCAA tournament. Johnson definitely fits that. He's gonna get so many shots for Miami. They lose Lonnie Walker and Bruce Brown to the NBA draft. He's gonna start at the 2 next to Chris Likes. I mean, he could average the same stat line that he did in the Atlantic Sun. That 16 points and 3 assists a game. So I think I had him a little too low. But I'm a little lower on Miami. It seems I have them as a solid NIT team. But if you think that Miami is a NCAA tournament team and Johnson's going to be probably their leading scorer, he would definitely deserve higher than 13th.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair estimation. So I've been through my top 5 now. I think I've only heard your top 3 from you. Who'd you have at 4 and 5, Brad?
All right, 4, I had Tremaine Isabel from Drexel to St. Louis. That addition, I think, makes St. Louis the clear favorite. They really needed a point guard who can hit shots, and that Isabel, Jordan Goodwin, and Javon Bess perimeter is going to be really solid.
Yeah, I like Isabel. I had him at 7. Isabel's a guy. He's essentially such a huge impact in terms of they needed a point guard who could create, and that's what Isabel is. He's more of a scorer. I'm still a little concerned with this team's inability to shoot the basketball because Tremaine Isabel was a 34% shooter. Granted, that was at high volume, but Jordan Goodwin was a 24% three-point shooter. Javon Bess was a 27% three-point shooter. Hassan French doesn't space the floor for you at all right now. I believe the scout on Carter Gordon he's not really a shooter either. Luis Santos, who a lot of people are high on, the big guy who's coming in from South Florida, he's also not really any stretch material. So I'm a little worried about this team's inability to shoot the ball. But Isabel's impact shouldn't be understated. I have him at 7, but you could go higher than that for sure.
Yeah, they really do not have any shooters at all. Their best shooter from last year, Jalen Johnson, is transferring. And even their 6th man, Dion Wiley, isn't a shooter. They also have DJ Foreman, the Rutgers transfer, who's more of like a combo forward, who I don't think can really shoot it that well either. So that's a very, very legitimate concern for the Billikens. And then at number 5, I had Evan Boudreau from Dartmouth to Purdue. He has 2 years of eligibility, which makes him, I think, super valuable. And I think that Purdue will get back to the NCAA tournament. He'll be a very nice pairing in the front court with Matt Harms, who gives you like the long shot blocking. He's more of like a Dylan Ozadkowski, Caleb Swanigan type of 4-5. And he can shoot it, and he's a great rebounder and interior player. So I think there's a lot to like about this edition.
Keeping Boudreau off my list was probably a mistake. I was going to put him, and probably should have put him in that 8, 9, 10 range. I'm not quite as high on him as some people are. The shootings is a big deal. If he hits threes, he's going to be super valuable. I think it's a little hard to kind of quantify his numbers, just given the fact that Dartmouth was terrible the 2 years he played for Dartmouth, and as good as he was doing everything, and now he's going to step into a role that's a lot different. And if he steps into that 4-man role with where Vince Edwards was, Vince Edwards is a lot better shot creator than I think the Evan Boudreau is. But then again, you're playing Harms instead of Haas. I'm really interested to see how the front court situation all plays out and how it changes the offense for Purdue. They're a team I'm going to have to do a lot of digging on the first month of the season.
And I think that they could use lineups similar to when they did Edwards and Swanigan. They could do Aaron Wheeler and Evan Boudreau. That's kind of a more one-to-one comparison there. I know that they did a lot of Swanigan and AJ Hammond's lineups as well. So Purdue kind of likes to recruit guys in the same mold. Like they'll have Ryan Klein at the 3, kind of in the same mold as Dakota Mathias, and then they have Sasha Stefanovic kind of in the same role as Klein. So they're really setting up a nice pipeline of players there.
Yeah, absolutely. My number 6, Ryan Wheelidge, headed to Xavier from San Jose State. I knew he was good at San Jose State. I'm going to be honest. I didn't watch very much San Jose State basketball. I didn't really feel the need to subject my eyes to such torture. But Ryan Wheelidge is an absolutely elite shooter at 6'9". He shot 43% from 3 on 5 attempts a game, 88% from the free throw line, 48% from the field as a whole. Actually, 46%, excuse me. He rebounded the ball okay at 5 boards a game. He's a bit skinny at 6'9". Last listed at 190 on Sports Reference. He might be a little heavier than that now. They tend to be a little bit behind on weights, but if nothing else, he's a really pure stretch 4 who helps out the Xavier team quite a bit.
Yeah, and Xavier really needs a stretch 4 to pair with Tyreek Jones, who's more of like a physical rebounding type. I mean, he's such a perfect fit on this roster. They really needed the 3-point shooting. And I mean, he could certainly average double figures. Putting up those numbers even on a bad team in the Mountain West is very impressive. I had Ryan Wheelidge at number 8. In terms of who I had number 6, I had Deshaun Murray from Auburn to Western Kentucky at number 6. Did you have Murray on your list at all?
Yes, I did. I had Murray at number 8. I spoke to a member of the Western Kentucky staff about Murray, and they're just super pumped to have him. They said it was really tough to land him. That there were so many teams who were really pushing to land him, but he's so valuable. Maryland, Baylor, Nevada, other programs were involved there, but they land Murray, that small ball 4 who creates defensively, competes on the boards. Obviously, there's the Charles Bassey factor that we'll be watching throughout the offseason, whether they can get Bassey to reclassify. That would change his role a little bit, although Bassey would probably be a 5 for Western Kentucky if they do land him for 2018. But regardless, I had Murray at number 8. I think he's a really, really nice piece.
Yeah, so we had Murray and Ryan Wheelidge flipped on each of our lists. I mean, Murray and then plus the guards, Lamonte Bearden, who ended up saying that he was going to sign with an agent and then ended up not signing with an agent and return to school, and Tavion Hollingsworth. That's a really good backcourt. And then you throw in Murray, throw in a guy like Josh Anderson. I mean, this is the clear favorite in the Conference USA in my estimation. I know some people have Marshall, some people have Old Dominion. You could even have a Middle Tennessee maybe, but I just think that this Western Kentucky team I think is not only good enough to win Conference USA, but I think that they could even be at large caliber.
Yeah, I'm right now on Marshall, but if they can get Bassey, that would change the game for me at least. Um, I've covered my top 8. You still have yet to hit one of your top 8. Do you want to hit your number 7?
Yep.
Because I believe 1 6 in there.
Number 7, I had Keyshawn Woods from Wake Forest to Ohio State. The Buckeyes has really needed a scoring threat from the perimeter. Woods has averaged double figures in the ACC for Wake Forest. He should step in and be a really nice fit on the perimeter. They have Luther Muhammad, a very talented and defensive-minded freshman who will probably be the 6th man off the bench. And then you have Musa Jallow and C.J. Jackson at the 3 and the 1 respectively. I think this is probably the most impactful addition in terms of I was really down on this Ohio State roster without Woods, and now with him, I think the pieces just fit so well that they could potentially return to the NCAA tournament despite losing Jayshawn Tate, key to base job, and Cam Williams. Woods kind of filling that Cam Williams role, but should see a little more responsibility.
Yeah, Woods was just outside my top 10, but certainly a very impactful piece. Here's a name that I had on there who is certainly going to be impactful. Trey Porter at Nevada. I just think his value as a rim runner and a rim protector who rebounds the ball and just gives them a 6'10" body who is skilled and experienced for a team that's going to compete for a title was so valuable. To me, I couldn't leave him out of the top 10.
Yeah, I had Porter at number 11 just because I thought I kind of had to hedge in terms of risk where there's a chance that he plays a limited role because Jordan Brown's playing so well, or maybe Trayshawn Turman needs some minutes, or maybe they go back to that Jordan Caroline at the 5 lineup. So I just thought that there were too many variables on this Nevada roster to confidently put him in the top 10. But he's certainly good enough, and that's why I had him at number 11 because I think that he will be the starting center opening day for Nevada.
Good stuff. I'll give you my my number 10, then you can give me your number 9. Ronnie Harrell was my 10 going to Denver. He was always one of my favorite guys at Creighton who I was he's good, but I feel like he could be better. He'll have a chance to really flash his full ability this year at Denver, and it could go really well or really poorly just because him having the ball in his hands a ton may not be the best thing in the world. But he was a 7.7 rebound, 2.5 assist guy. Could shoot the ball a little bit, create his own shot. I'm really excited to watch him. I think he's an all-league player in the Summit League.
Yeah, this was a crushing loss for the Creighton Blue Jays. I mean, he was kind of a reluctant shooter and scorer during his time at Creighton. I mean, most of the team was, as they kind of deferred to Marcus Foster and Kyrie Thomas. But I mean, he's a perfect glue guy. He's this perfect, very mobile power forward who can create. He's a good passer. He can handle the ball. He even played some point guard for Creighton two seasons ago. Kind of reminds me of Jermaine Haley, who's going to be a JUCO transfer for West Virginia this year. Just kind of a do-it-all kind of glue guy. I actually had him at number 17 because I think Denver's clearly at least behind South Dakota State in the Summit League. So I just don't know how much of a national impact that he'll have. But I mean, he's certainly a very good player who's a proven starter in the Big East. And then in terms of my last player on my list at number 9, I had Joe Chartouni, who should be the new starting point guard for Marquette and should be a great fit with Marcus Howard in the backcourt.
Yeah, Chartouni's good. One of the tough cuts for me, just a guy who will create both offensively and defensively. Very good piece there. Those are our top 10 lists then. I believe we've touched on them all. I'll tweet out our lists with the podcast link once that goes live. So look forward to that. So you guys can look at those and kind of read along, as I know it can be a bit confusing to follow as you listen. We do have a few more news and notes around the college basketball world from really the last 2 weeks because we were so focused on draft decisions a week ago that we just wanted to touch on to kind of wrap up the show, Brad. The first one I'll run point on. Jordan Lathan is out at Northwestern. That's about a week and a half old news at this point. reports are that it's not academic related. I have also heard that exact same thing, but he had his admission revoked by the university. Northwestern quickly responds with a 3-star point guard in Ryan Greer, who had originally been a 2019 recruit. They're going to get him to come a year early. Greer's a guy I'm a pretty high on, 6'3", 6'4" guard who shot the ball extremely well both in high school and in prep school. Having really good numbers on the AAU circuit right now for the Under Armour circuit for NE6. He's a guy. They're really thin at point guard still, but if he can play well, I really like the look of this Northwestern team.
Yeah, this is such a key addition. Kind of wish that they got a grad transfer for this spot, but I mean they're kind of looking long term here. There's not too much talent left out there on the grad transfer market, so getting a reclassification is a great creative way to fill this hole. So you think that he's going to start from day one?
I think so. I think he's a better point guard than Jordan Ash, the senior, although Ash might start early in the year and then Greer kind of take the reins as the season goes on. They do still have one scholarship left, so there's a small chance they could go get a grad transfer. And has some talent.
Yeah, so I think that we just lost connection there for a little bit. So I didn't quite hear what you just said about Ryan Greer there. But just I think just moving on. Ehab Amin is out at Nevada. This was a clear move after the Martin twins returned. He's one of the top grad transfers on the market right now. I know that Miami could actually use a wing. Louisville could use a wing. A few other teams. So what did you think about this Ehab Amin development?
A little surprised given that he committed on the thought process that he'd be a national title contender with Nevada, and he was recruited by the Martin twins. I don't necessarily think it was his choice, which to me is a little odd, but at the same time, Nevada has to play a really difficult game of, we don't ruin the future just for this year, but at the same time, you go all in for a title. So they do cut Ehab Amin, but they do keep their 2 freshman signees in KJ Lee and Vincent, KJ Himes and Vincent Lee. They keep their 2 freshmen. They're going to keep Jalen Harris from Louisiana Tech. Per a source, he's going to be at Nevada. They're also going to keep some of these other transfers like a Jazz Johnson. Those guys won't be leaving either. Jazz Johnson, Corey Henson. So they'll have some pieces for that senior year of Johnson and of Nizri Zuzua. You got to make sure with this Nevada team that Musselman doesn't leave them completely bare if he wins the national title and then all of a sudden leaves for UCLA, for instance. It looks like they still will have some pieces in place. So losing Amin for the long term isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I mean, he was going to be probably a 6th man for them, but they have so many other potential 6 men on the roster, like guys like Josh Hall, or like any of these scoring guards that you mentioned. That, I mean, it really doesn't move the needle for Nevada, and he'll be better off at another school where he can play more minutes, and that school will benefit more from having his contributions. In terms of some of the sit-out transfers that have recently announced their intentions, Jair Bolden from George Washington to South Carolina. He should be their starting point guard when he's eligible. He was a double-figure scorer in the Atlantic 10. And then kind of interesting one, Sule Boom to UTEP. He was a double-figure scorer as a freshman at San Francisco and is now headed to the Conference USA program to play for Rodney Terry. Yeah, right. Not Perry. It's Terry. Right? No,
Yeah,
I'm
Rodney
wrong.
Terry. Rodney Terry.
I'm so mixed up right now. But you wrote an article that got a fair amount of traction about UTEP. So do you want to kind of describe what kind of impact Boom and these other UTEP transfers are making on the program?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this UTEP team. I've had a chance to really follow what they're doing, and I wrote that article about a week and a half ago. Sorry about the lack of written content recently, guys. It's just been like I'm busy with life stuff, so just haven't written as much as I'd like. But they're writing this team is going to be really good in 2 to 3 years because they have some really good freshmen coming in, and then they've signed both Suli Boom, who is really solid as a freshman at San Francisco, showed some bright moments, and Anthony Tark from NJIT, who we've touched on the podcast as well. They also had Bryson Williams visiting from Fresno State, who they have a good chance of landing. So future is certainly bright at UTEP.
Yeah, and then a couple of grad transfers too worth mentioning. Christian Mekawulu from Tennessee State declared for the draft, then withdrew from the draft, and is going to be a grad transfer at Texas A&M, filling in for Tyler Davis. This is a huge pickup for Texas A&M, who, if the SEC wasn't so loaded, I think I would have them as a sneaky bubble team. But he and Josh Nebo who is a transfer from St. Francis of Pennsylvania, both pretty good shot blockers at the 5 position, should split the center position. I think that Mikawolu will probably play more. He could play like 25 minutes a game. Maybe average like 7 or 8 points. So that's a pretty impactful move for like a potential NIT team from the SEC.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big fan of that pickup. Just a useful rotation piece. One more grad transfer that came out today was Connor Cashaw to Creighton. He was a guy who put up huge numbers this year at Rice as that primary scorer, and efficiency took a hit. I don't think that's necessarily the role he should play at Creighton, although he'll do well in a much more spaced out environment. But this is a really nice pickup. Creighton missed on a bunch of guys. So to get one finally was huge for them. And I was joking that, the reason why I don't think anyone knew Connor Cashaw was a grad transfer was Creighton was working behind the scenes to make sure that the name did not get out until he had put pen to paper, because they were not ready to miss on yet another grad transfer that they came so close on. So good on Greg McDermott to finally land one. Definitely much needed pickup.
Yeah, I'm very down on Creighton compared to consensus. I saw a couple people on Reddit today said that that Creighton's a lock to finish between 2 and 4. I have them at number 9 in the Big East Conference. I mean, this is a pretty good addition. He's going to start next to a Mitch Ballack and a Tyshawn Alexander as like those 3 kind of perimeter wings playing 2 through 4. Whether he's the 4 or a Ballack is the 4 is just semantics, but I think Creighton's just at a bit of a talent deficit right now compared to the rest of the league. But it's like Connor Cashaw could probably score close to double figures in his one season in Omaha. It's also worth mentioning that I guess he's former high school teammates and like very good friends with Jalen Brunson, the former Big East superstar at Villanova.
Yeah, I saw that one as well. It's a funny little tidbit as Cashaw will head to the Big East. Anything else you wanted to touch on today, Brad, before we wrap this baby up?
We can end with a former Siena big man, Prince Oduro, going to Mississippi State.
Yeah. I'll give my thoughts on that quick, then you can give yours, because Prince is an interesting guy. Prince is a guy who I've been monitoring for basically 2 years, since the senior year of high school. I watched him through FIBA U19 with Canada. I watched him at Siena. He's very talented, 6'8", 240 pounds. He's very strong. He's built for a freshman. He's got very strong legs, strong biceps. This is a guy who bullied his way around a lot in the MAC. But at the same time has a lot to work on. He's a horrible free throw shooter, like one of the worst I've ever seen. He shot 33% at the free throw line, just mind-bogglingly bad. He doesn't rebound extremely well for his size. Doesn't have a great, doesn't go out of his kind of like area to rebound, which is something I want to see him do more of, and then just finishing around the rim. So he's a guy who has a lot of upside, but he has a lot of work to do. That redshirt year is going to be critical. Mississippi State was always where he was going to go. To me, those other visits didn't matter. He might as well have just been taking a free paid vacation to South Florida, because even though he did have a friend at South Florida, which was going to likely mean that they got a visit, Ben Howland's been recruiting Prince Oduro since last March, when he told his prep coach at a tournament, well, if Oduro wasn't signed at Siena already, he'd be my starting center at Mississippi State next year. And it's to no surprise to me that Mississippi State is landing Prince Oduro. My guess is his prep coach had been shopping Prince Oduro to Mississippi State before Jimmy Patsos was even fired. Oduro's prep coach is the same coach who basically shopped Samson George from Iona to Pitt once Pitt had their mass exodus. So not that Oduro did anything wrong, and I certainly don't. I commend him for moving up, and I think he's going to be a really nice player at Mississippi State once he develops. It's certainly, I think it's a situation of kind of the way of college basketball, and a good sense of what goes on behind the scenes a lot of times in the college basketball world.
Yeah, I don't know how much he's going to play, though. I mean, they already have Abdul Adu, who will be a junior when Prince Oduro is eligible as a sophomore, I believe. And then they also have Jethro Shimumpa, the former top 70 recruit who started his career at Arizona State. So that's a very, very crowded center position. I don't think that you want him playing a lot of power forward, but I mean, I think that UMass would have been the best fit when Rashawn Holloway graduates after this year, and then he would, be the starting center on a top tier team in the Atlantic 10. But to each his own, I guess.
Yeah, to me, UMass was the better fit, but it was just kind of a situation of he was going to go to Mississippi State, and maybe he finds his role. I think it's going to take time for him to develop, but he had some really nice moments. He had, I think, 12-6 against Spain in that FIBA tournament. He had some really big games this year at Siena. He had 21-10 in a closed scrimmage against UMass in the preseason, which is what piqued Matt McCall's interest. Season opening 11-10 double against Charles at Charleston, 17-8 against Hofstra. He had foul problems at this year a few times, but he's a bright young talent, and I'm sad that he won't be developing in green and gold, but he's not necessarily the right fit for Jamion Christian's system. He's a guy who really needs the ball in his hands and post-ups, because he doesn't really provide a ton of value beyond scoring punch, because, as I said, not a great rebounder. He's not a big rim protector. He's not a guy who shoots free throws extremely well, doesn't pass, doesn't shoot. He's a very good post-up big guy, and he can almost be like an instant offense five, where he comes in for 5 minutes, where he won't get winded. He can come in, catch post-ups, and he's got a fairly developed post package for a freshman. I think that might be the best role, actually, for him going forward at Mississippi State, is kind of that come in, get post-up looks, and go to work.
Great insight there from someone who's seen Prince Oduro play infinitely more times than I have. I
can't believe you didn't watch more of the 8-24 Siena Saints this season, Brad.
I didn't realize that they were that bad. I was looking at Providence's non-conference opponents, and you guys were 303rd in KenPom last year, or something like that.
Yeah, it was just a rough season. They were young, and Patsos didn't really get through to those guys, but Jamion Christian's got him turning around in the right direction. Had today on campus Dima Zador, a 2018 big guy, who has kind of been a stock riser late in the process. Right now has offers from Illinois, from Arkansas, a couple of other good mid-major programs, and he's on campus today at Siena. I think they're considered the favorite on this one, so that'd be a huge pickup. They've already landed a elite defensive prospect in Jalen Pickett. a shooter in Sloan Seymour, Mount St. Mary's transfer Donald Carey. So the future's bright in Loudonville. Just give it a year or two, and Jamie and Christian will have that program turned around. So if you needed any more Siena propaganda, everyone, there you have it at the end of our CBB Central podcast episode today. Thanks for listening, everybody. Brad, any closing thoughts before we wrap it up on today's show?
Nope. I think this was a fun breakdown of some of the top guys that have changed teams, and we'll see them making a pretty huge impact in college basketball next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to everything to come in the next month and a half of basketball, whether it's the draft, whether it's FIBA U18, whether it's TBT. It's all starting to come up. And then we'll have foreign trips. And before we know it, it'll be college basketball season. Bear with us, everybody. Keep listening to the podcast. Thanks, as always, for your support, and have a great night.